Have you ever looked at your life and thought, this isn't what I thought it would be? Maybe you thought your marriage would last. Maybe you thought someone you love would get better. Maybe you thought these years would be easier, more secure, more joyful. And instead, you found yourself navigating disappointment, grief, uncertainty, and dreams that never quite become reality. I think one of the hardest things we experience isn't the pain of what happened, it's the loss of what we thought would happen. Because we're not only grieving people or circumstances, sometimes we're grieving hopes, expectations, futures we imagined, stories we thought we were living. And the question becomes, what do we do when life doesn't go according to plan? When the miracle doesn't come the way we hoped? When we can't fix the situation and we don't know how the story ends? Can we still have joy? Can we still trust God? Can we still take back happy? I believe the answer is yes. Not because everything turns out the way we wanted, but because our hope was never meant to rest on perfect circumstances. It was always meant to rest on a faithful God. Hi, friends. Welcome to Taking Back Happy. I'm your host, Gina Granville, God's girl, retired homeschool mom of 4, empty nester, GG, essential oil and exercise enthusiast, Christian life coach, and someone who is taking back her own happy. I know many of you feel exactly like me in these midlife years, a sort of loss of direction, but you feel way too young and vibrant to sit on the porch and just watch life go by. What if you could reclaim your life, finding deep joy, renewed passion and purpose, and plenty of adventure in these midlife years? If you are ready to find your spark again, throw on those walking shoes, pop in those earbuds, and join me right here as we take back happy together. Hey, my Taking Back Happy friends. I would love to connect with you. And even more than that, I believe that taking back happy is something that can really happen in a community. So I invite you to come into the Taking Back Happy Facebook group. It's a great place where other women are in there and we're encouraging one another and we're sharing our stories. And it's a very uplifting place to be. So I encourage you to come in there. Also, another place, if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can become a TBH Insider. When you become a TBH Insider, you get a weekly email with the latest podcast, tips on creating a happy mindset, early bird access to special offers, and encouraging Bible devos. And lastly, I would encourage you to take advantage of the free one-on-one life coaching call. This is a freebie for all of our Taken Back Happy listeners. Have you ever realized that sometimes the thing you're grieving the most isn't what happened, it's what you thought would happen? Today, I'm going to be real with you. I'm going to talk to you about what I've learned, like through divorce, through watching my brother's long journey after his suicide attempt, and through walking with my mom in the season of aging and uncertainty. In my mind's eye, I pictured a strong and healthy marriage. I pictured a healing and a restoration. I pictured a happy ending, and I pictured security in that too. And then life wrote a different story. So I'll give you a brief little background. I got married. I was so happy. Everything was really going great until we had kids, and things got so strained after we had kids. And there was just a bunch of different background and scenarios for that, including how my ex-husband grew up and that sort of thing. Several years went by and we were really rocky, and then things got a lot better. And then it would just, it started getting bad again. It just went downhill, downhill, downhill until we ended up getting a divorce. That was really hard. I know if you've been through a divorce, you understand that. The second scenario was my brother. He attempted suicide at about the same time that I filed for divorce. So I filed in, I think, September 2013, and he attempted suicide about that same time. And so I remember I was going back and forth from Indianapolis to Panama City, and I had all this other stuff going on at the same time, because I'd already put the process in motion for the divorce. It was just so hard at that time. And I was like, okay, ultimately, he went through all these different things. He shouldn't have lived when it happened. And then he went through a surgery, he shouldn't have lived. And then he was in a coma for over a week. He shouldn't have woke up. But God had a different plan. And so I was so thankful. And I had it in my mind because God had this different plan that it was just going to be like happy go lucky from there on forward. And it really wasn't. There were just a lot of struggles over the years. Once he got out of ICU and out of the hospital, and then he was in a brain injury hospital, and then finally he went back to my parents' home and was getting recovery. He was doing really well and having therapy and improving just immensely. Then he ended up going through a divorce himself, and that was just a total setback. He ended up being in and out of one nursing home after another. He was in these different skilled nursings getting treatment. And every so many years, there'd be like this, like, oh, he's going to do therapy again. And we get all hyped up and stuff. And then it just never really worked out because the brain injury, it just made it super hard for him. So it wasn't what I was expecting. And then that brought me to the recent times, and that was with my mom. And she lived in her own apartment. And then in the last couple of years, she lived with me, and that was just super hard. It was really stressful for her. It was stressful for me. And as she continued to get more and more dementia, we realized she was going to need to go into an assisted living. We did that, and we were so excited because she was going to be able to take her dog with her, and her dog just was everything to her, right? And so we get to the assisted living, and it turned out she was not able to do that. She was newly on a walker. It just wasn't safe. And so I had to take the dog. I currently have the dog, and we're just navigating that day by day because the expense of the assisted living is really more than we can afford. So we're just like in the midst of that right this very minute. But enough about me. I know you guys have your own struggles. You have your own things going on. They could be some similar to what I went through, and they could be totally different. But let's talk about the lessons that we can learn through all these things. So lesson number 1 is grieve what was lost, even if it never fully existed. Ouch. That's a little intense. But let's look at divorce. We're not just grieving the end of a marriage. We're literally grieving like the dream, the future you imagined, the hope that things had finally turned around, the years invested. And like, for instance, with my brother, I grieved over and over again, not just the suicide attempt, but every setback afterward, every hope that maybe this year would be different. And then, looking like at my mom, and especially if you're taking care of an elderly person, you're grieving the loss of independence for her. You're grieving the loss of certainty, the picture that you had of how these years would look. These are the golden years. But if you look at this, the truth is grief is not weakness. Sometimes we're grieving things we never actually had, but we deeply hope for. In Psalm 13:1, David asked the Lord, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever?" And I think we feel like that sometimes. And that brings me to lesson number 2. God can be good even when the outcome isn't. This is where our faith gets real, because sometimes the miracle isn't like the marriage being restored or the brain injury being healed or the finances becoming easy. Sometimes the miracle is discovering that God is still here. In divorce, he met me, and he'll meet you too. He'll sustain you. He'll rebuild you. Like with my brother, God walked with our family through all those hard years. With my mom, you don't even know what the next month is going to hold, but we already know, and we've already seen God's faithfulness over and over again. And just like I've seen it over and over again, so have you. So can you. Isaiah 43:2 says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." Notice that God didn't promise us no waters. He promised us his presence. And the third lesson, hope doesn't require certainty. This might be the strongest point if you think about it. We often think that hope means, oh, I know everything's going to work out. But biblically, hope doesn't say that. Hope says, I don't know how this ends, but I know who walks with me. Right now, I don't know how my mom's finances are going to work out. They may not work out. She might have to move to a different facility. I don't think that would be the best for her, but that might be how it works out. But I have experience because I didn't know how the divorce story would end, and I didn't know how long my brother would live. And yet, God supplied enough grace for each season. Not 10 years at a time, not forever, but just enough for today. And just like He did that for me, He will do that for you. He will give you enough grace for today. Lamentations 3:22 and 23 reminds us that because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I don't know about you, but I want God's compassion. Another word that they say there is mercy. I want His compassion. I want His mercy. And notice it doesn't say they're new every decade or they're new every 5 years. It says they're new every morning. As a final thought, while we're taken back happy, perhaps happiness isn't found in getting the life we expected. Perhaps joy is actually found in discovering that God is present in the life that we actually have. And maybe taken back happy isn't about getting all our dreams back. Maybe it's about discovering that disappointment doesn't get the final word because God is still in the story writing business. So my taken back happy friends, as I look back over my own life, I realize that I've grieved more than just events. I've grieved like expectations. I've grieved the marriage I thought I'd have. I've grieved the healing I hoped for my brother. I've grieved the picture I had in my mind for these golden years with my mom. And maybe that's true for you too. Maybe your story is different from mine, but your grief sounds familiar. Maybe you're grieving a relationship that ended. Maybe you're grieving a dream that never came true. Maybe you're grieving the life you thought you would be living by now. And if that's where you're at, I want you to hear this. Your story is not behind schedule. God has not forgotten you, and disappointment does not get the final word. Because the truth is, none of us get a perfect story, but every one of us is invited into a redeemed story. And maybe taken back happy isn't about finally getting everything we wanted. Maybe it's about learning to recognize God's goodness in the middle of a life we're actually living. Maybe it's believing that joy and sorrow can sit in the same room. Maybe it's trusting that even when we don't understand what God is doing, we can trust His heart. And maybe, just maybe, the life you have right now isn't God's backup plan. It isn't His second best. It isn't His plan B. Maybe this chapter is one you never would have chosen, but it still is holy. It's still meaningful. It's still filled with purpose. It's still being held by a faithful God. So friend, if life looks different than you thought it would, you're not disqualified from joy. You're not too late. You're not forgotten. And you do not have to wait until everything is fixed to begin living again, because God is still writing. And as long as He's still writing, there's still hope. And that means it's never too late to take back your own happy. So let's do this, my friends. We don't have to wait for life to be perfect to take back our happy. If this podcast blessed and encouraged you today, I'd love for you to share it with your friends. You can take a screenshot and share it in your stories, but make sure you tag me at Gina Granville so we can connect. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Make sure you join my Taking Back Happy Facebook group. I'll meet you back here soon, and we'll continue taking back happy together.